On September 23rd, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Chinese leader Xi Jinping believes subnational-level officials are a weak link that can be exploited to advance the regime's interests in the United States. In a speech at the Wisconsin state capitol, Pompeo urged U.S. politicians from state to municipal level to be alert to the Chinese Communist Party's influence and espionage activities. Pompeo said,
"Know that when you're approached by a Chinese diplomat, it is likely not in the spirit of cooperation or friendship."
The secretary said the CCP has for decades deployed friendly language while stealing from our innovators, building military strength, and co-opting our elites. For instance, he offered a translation of Xi's remarks in August to a group of government economists and sociologists in Beijing. "We must actively develop cooperation with all countries, regions, and enterprises willing to cooperate with us, including states, localities, and enterprises in the United States." Pompeo said,
"She knows that the federal government is pushing back against the Chinese Communist Party here in the United States and its malign influence. He thinks local leaders may well be the weak link."
Pompeo added that for Xi, cooperation and opening up means the CCP wants to create arrangements that only benefit the CCP. He warned that the ultimate goal of the regime's malign influence activities is to make Americans receptive to Beijing's form of authoritarianism. The state secretary said the CCP's efforts to sway state and local officials have intensified over the years. He cited the example of a Californian state senator who in 2017 sought to introduce a measure denouncing the regime's persecution of Falun Gong, a spiritual practice suppressed by the CCP since 1999. Pompeo said,
"These people that he was speaking to have suffered as tremendously under the Chinese Communist Party's crackdowns on religious freedom as any others."
According to Pompeo, the Chinese consulate in San Francisco wrote to the Californian legislature saying the senator's resolution might
deeply damage the cooperative relations between the state of California and China, and seriously hurt the feeling of Chinese people in the vast Chinese community inside of California.
He said that as a result, the California State Senate bowed to the CCP pressure campaign and shelved the proposed bill. The secretary also referred to a Chinese official's attempt earlier this year to get Wisconsin Senate President Roger Roth to support a resolution supporting the regime's CCP virus containment efforts. A consul of the Chinese consulate in Chicago, Wu Ting, emailed Roth twice to seek his backing. The attempts backfired, prompting an angry Roth to reject the proposal and instead introduce a resolution condemning the CCP's cover-up of the outbreak. Pompeo said, the reality is that most every state legislature in the country has probably received a letter from the CCP like Senator Roth's as part of a coordinated propaganda campaign. He also raised another example involving Wu, when she forwarded a letter from her husband to the Consul General in Chicago to Wisconsin Congressman Mike Gallagher's district director. Pompeo said that the letter was full of CCP propaganda and disinformation about the pandemic. But what really caught my eye was her declaration. We are firmly opposed to racial discrimination and xenophobia against the local Chinese community and stigmatization of China and the Chinese people over the virus. Pompeo decried this as an attempt by the CCP to drown out American cries for accountability with shouts of racism. The state secretary said, America's righteous anger at the CCP over its handling of the coronavirus has nothing to do with race and everything to do with citizens dead, children kept from school, and jobs lost. Pompeo added that the regime wants to foment the kind of strife we've seen in Minneapolis and Portland and Kenosha, where race-related protests and violent rioting have erupted in the past months.
That's disgusting. We can't let it happen. I'm confident it won't.
On September 22nd, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's principal China policy advisor, Anhui-born Dr. Miles Yu, made a rare public appearance to reject the multilateralism approach advocated to the world by Chinese leader Xi Jinping at the UN General Assembly. Yu, who has been labeled the #1 traitor to the Chinese race in modern history by Chinese state media, said that Xi's comments stemmed from a lack of self-awareness. He said China's ruling Chinese Communist Party is isolated with no true allies, apart from North Korea and Russia, which is plain hard to get. He also commented about the CCP's lack of trustworthiness as shown by its brutal and semi-fascist actions in Hong Kong. Yu made the comments while addressing an online discussion about the implications of the CCP's actions in Hong Kong, hosted by Canadian think tank, the MacDonald-Laurier Institute. He stated, shared values, that's the foundation for multilateralism. We, the United States, have countries like Australia, Japan, the UK, Canada, EU, NATO, and ASEAN organization countries. We all share the same values. He called on friends and allies all over the world that share the same values as the United States to build an alliance of democracies to counter the China threat. He said, just about every liberal democracy in the world recognizes China is a threat. Always keep in mind, China has none that can be trusted as a real, true ally. So it's very ironic yesterday to hear Xi Jinping at the UN to talk about China being the champion of multilateralism. Yu rejected Xi's claim and called it a complete reflection of lack of self-awareness. He said that the United States is more multilateral than any other country in the world when facing the China challenge, which is global and existential, but argued that multilateralism has to have a goal itself. Citing multilateral talks by previous U.S. administrations with 5 other parties that failed to move the dial on the North Korea problem, he said, parties, dialogues, and banquets themselves are not necessarily a kumbaya that will solve the problems in the world. He said that President Donald Trump had chosen a different approach, opting to talk to Kim Jong-un directly and having neutralized him for a good 3.5 years now. Yu went on to say that the goal for the United States regarding China and the region is the preservation of values like freedom and rule of law that have been extinguished in Hong Kong. He said, China views the entire international system as this endless struggle between the Chinese socialism with Chinese characteristics, and the rest of the world. So they want us to forget the systemic, political, and ideological differences between the two systems. Miles Yu, whose Chinese name is Yu Mao Chun, was born in China and came to the United States for graduate school in 1985. He is a professor of East Asian and military and naval history at the United States Naval Academy and a key member of the State Department's policy planning staff, which is known as the department's internal think tank. Many believe that Yu is the central figure in the Trump administration's policy-making regarding China. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo described him as a central part of my team, while David Stilwell, Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, called Yu a national treasure. Yu's tough stance against Communist China has irritated Beijing. The CCP has recently taken a series of actions to retaliate against him, as reported by the Epoch Times. In the online discussion on September 22nd, Yu also described Hong Kong's situation since 1997 as a grand experiment that has failed miserably. He said that Hong Kong was an experiment to test the validity of the Chinese Communist Party's trustworthiness, which has failed, revealing to the world that they cannot trust Beijing. Beijing promised to maintain the one country, two systems for 50 years when the UK returned Hong Kong to Chinese rule in 1997. But the communist regime has already gone back on its words, trying to impose communism and totalitarianism on the Hong Kong people. Yu views the CCP's one country, two systems as a bankrupt idea because of its own inner contradiction. He pointed out that the national unification for China would be meaningless without political freedom. He cited the reunification of East and West Germany as an example, and also the Korean Peninsula. He said, people will not be united under a totalitarian regime. He added, I think the people in Hong Kong have chosen the system of freedom and the rule of law, not the system of communist autocracy in the name of natural unification. He said that Communist China's brutal crackdown on democracy and imposing its national security law in Hong Kong has seen its one country, two systems model completely lose its exemplary effect on Taiwan.
Facebook has shut down more than 180 fake accounts, groups, pages, and Instagram accounts that it determined to be run in China. These accounts posted content on the U.S. presidential election and spread Beijing's talking points on a range of topics from the South China Sea to Hong Kong protests. The U.S. social media giant announced the takedown in a blog post published on September 22nd, saying that these accounts were a violation of its rule against coordinated, inauthentic behavior on behalf of a foreign or government entity. In total, 155 Facebook accounts, 11 pages, 9 groups, and 6 Instagram accounts were shut down. The Instagram app is owned by Facebook. Nathaniel Glitcher, Facebook's head of security policy and author of the blog post, explained that while people behind these accounts try to conceal their identity and location, including by using virtual private networks, the company was able to trace the account operations to southern China's Fujian province. Chinese netizens commonly use VPNs to bypass China's internet blockade and access websites banned in China, such as Facebook, Instagram, and Google. According to Facebook, this Chinese-created network focused most of its posts on Southeast Asia, posting news about global events such as Chinese and U.S. naval activities in the South China Sea, protests in Hong Kong, and support for current Filipino President Rodrigo Duterte and the possible 2022 presidential bid of his daughter, Sara Duterte, who is currently the mayor of Davao City in the Philippines. People behind these accounts posted in Chinese, Filipino, and English. Glitcher stated that on the upcoming U.S. election, these accounts posted content both in support of and against presidential candidates Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump. In terms of the campaign's appeal, about 133,000 Facebook accounts followed one or more of these fake Facebook pages, and around 61,000 people joined one or more of these groups. However, according to Glitcher, the network gained almost no following in the United States. Facebook also followed a second inauthentic network originating from the Philippines. The firm took down 57 accounts, 31 pages, and 20 Instagram accounts in connection with it. This isn't the first time that Facebook has removed Chinese-affiliated fake accounts. In August 2019, Facebook removed 5 accounts, 7 pages, and 3 groups from a network that originated in China. The accounts used a number of deceptive tactics to post misleading information about the Hong Kong protests, including managing pages posing as news organizations. In this case, Facebook said that its investigation found links to individuals associated with the Chinese government.
Ren Zhiqiang, the former chairman of Huayuan Property Co., Limited, who is known as a second-generation party member and a critic of the CCP leader Xi Jinping, has been sentenced to 18 years in prison on 4 economic charges, including corruption. On September 22nd, the Beijing No. 2 Intermediate Court handed down its first instant verdict to real estate tycoon Ren Zhiqiang. Ren was found guilty of corruption, bribery, embezzlement, and abuse of power by personnel in state-owned companies, and sentenced to 18 years in prison and fined 4.2 million yuan, $615,000 USD. Public opinion went into an uproar when the news broke. Mr. Wang, a Chinese rights activist, says this is a classic case of being convicted for speech.
It is shocking that he was given such a heavy sentence. He made some comments on the epidemic in China in March this year, which caused the current retaliation. He was convicted for his words. Mr. Ren Zhiqiang resigned as chairman and CEO of Huayuan Property after a strict economic examination. No problem was identified. How can there be so many problems now?
Such a crime is a contrivance. He is an entrepreneur. He has plenty of money. He has no need for corruption. It was a political problem, and they turned it into an economic problem. They convicted him unjustly.
69-year-old Ren Zhiqiang is known in the Chinese media as the Ren Cannon for his outspoken criticism of Chinese politics. In February, in response to the epidemic in Wuhan, he wrote an article accusing the government of gross negligence and insinuating that Xi was a clown who insists on being the emperor even when he is naked.
Ren Zhiqiang can be said to be a very conscientious person in the establishment, also a sensible person. A lot of problems he addressed are very pertinent, representative of what we all want to say.
Wang said the sentence of 18 years was meant to deter others, but not to much effect.
They may not get the results they want. Human civilization has developed this day. Human rights, democracy, constitutionalism, and the rule of law has been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. It is wishful thinking to expect that punishing one or two people will impede the progress of human civilization.
In response to the court's assertion that Ren had pleaded guilty and wouldn't appeal, Mr. Wang argued that Ren must have been coerced and that his refusal to appeal reflects his contempt for the CCP's judicial system.
If you think about Ren's children being locked up and arrested, how can there be justice under the rule of law when both the government and the court belong to the party? Appeal is useless. Therefore, his non-appeal is not a admission of guilt, but a contempt for the judicial system.
They didn't have a public trial. We have to accept whatever they say. Many people confess their crimes in court. There are plenty of ways to do that. During the dispute between Liu Bang and Xiang Yu marched Liu's father to the front and forced Liu to surrender.
Gao Yu, a former journalist in Beijing, also told the media that Ren's non-appeal must have something to do with his son being coerced and that there was a deal behind it. The Epoch Times recently obtained internal documents from Inner Mongolia, revealing that the CCP will test major conventional weapons in the next 5 years. CCP military secrets, including the positions of medium and long-range launch sites, as well as the CCP's military expenditures. This document was from the Inner Mongolia Alxa League Development and Reform Commission. According to the document, the branch of the China Ordnance Industry Testing and Research Institute located in Alxa has built medium and long-range launch positions, air defense and anti-missile positions, and high-energy damage test sites. The document also exposed the CCP's key information on the development of hypersonic weapons, the construction of the rocket sled testing site, the main equipment used to test supersonic aircraft. Current affairs commentator Li Lingyi said that this internal document from Alxa Inner Mongolia is special because Inner Mongolia is a very important strategic hub for the CCP.
Dongfang Aerospace City is there. The CCP's Air Force Base, 20 Base, 051 Base, and Rocket Force Base are all there. The PRC's first atomic bomb, the first intercontinental missile, the first artificial satellite, the first unmanned spacecraft, and the first manned spacecraft were all launched in Inner Mongolia. Therefore, Inner Mongolia is a very important strategic hub for it, starting from Russia, passing through Inner Mongolia all the way down to Guangdong, and the other way to Taiwan. This blue vertical line fully demonstrates that Inner Mongolia is a strategic hub.
These internal documents also revealed the CCP's military expenditures.
For example, the military-civilian integration project promoted by the local government, the promotion of the 20-base international space launch and the construction of Science and Technology Innovation Zone, and the Alxa Experimental Zone rocket sled extension and the first phase of construction of the National Defense Science and Technology Industrial Park. The local government is responsible for all of these.
It can be reasonably estimated that the resources the CCP invests in the military each year and the proportion of military expenditures in GDP are much higher than the figures announced.
Chinese authorities locked down Ruili City, located in southwest China's Yunnan province, on September 14th after the city reported 2 new cases of the CCP virus. On September 19th, Yunnan provincial government held a pandemic prevention and control meeting demanding that all regions in the province enter a wartime state and strengthen border control. Chinese netizens questioned why the authorities took such serious measures if there are only 2 confirmed cases. Beijing News reported that at the Yunnan provincial government meeting, officials from Ruili, Menghai, Tengchong, Hekou, Pu'er reported local pandemic control situations. The meeting concluded that all levels and all regions must adhere to centralized command and engage in unified operations. The entire province would enter a wartime state, and border control must be tightened among other tasks. Ruili is a small city on the China-Burma border, and the 2 confirmed cases were reported on September 13th. Local authorities announced their decision to lock down the city the next day. All schools were suspended. Chinese authorities claimed that these 2 confirmed cases were imported from Burma because the patients recently crossed the China-Burma border illegally. According to Chinese state media, a makeshift hospital has been built in 1 day. Officials also announced a plan for mass testing.
About 60,000 people took the test yesterday alone. There are about 300,000 residents in Ruili. It's impossible to complete the mass testing for the entire population within 1 day. It will take 4 or 5 days.
On the night of the lockdown, authorities dispatched more than 200 medical staff from Dali Prefecture of Yunnan to Ruili City overnight to provide support. According to the video posted by netizens, Ruili's makeshift hospital is estimated to have a capacity of roughly 1,000 beds. Netizens asked, if there are only 2 confirmed cases, why dispatch 200 medics to support Ruili, and why was there a need to build such a big makeshift hospital? A local resident told NTD-TV that hospitals in Ruili City were taking in suspected patients.
We are not very clear about the situation because no one has witnessed it, but we were notified that we should try to avoid the hospitals. Residents who live near the hospitals were told to be extra careful. They must wear a mask when going out, so we know that suspected patients were sent to local hospitals. We have seen that medical staff sometimes were standing outside. In the evening, there were a large number of medics standing outside the hospital.
Another resident said that the lockdown announcement was made in a rush. Residents had to go out at midnight to hoard food and daily necessities.
The lockdown announcement came so abruptly. Everything was normal during the day. No one would have imagined that the city would be locked down so soon. Around 11 p.m. on September 14th, when almost everyone either had gone to bed or was ready to sleep, we were first notified that schools would be suspended. Then, when it was almost 12 a.m., we received notice that the city may be locked down the next day. Everyone rushed to go shopping. Between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., community staff went from house to house knocking on our doors to tell us that we must take the nucleic acid test during daytime. We were busy making preparations all night.
A resident near Xinguang Road told NTD-TV that all communities in the neighborhood were sealed off. Residents were forbidden to walk around.
There are several exits in our community. There are guards at all these exits. Large supermarkets are still open today. Express parcel delivery was all stopped today because the delivery guys won't be able to get in. Many rushed to buy rice and cooking oil. There are very few people on the main streets today. Everyone went to take the nucleic acid test yesterday. Today, people mostly stayed inside. Those on the street are the ones who had not taken the test yesterday. They are the only people on the street.
Some residents complained on social media that meat prices increased to more than $15 per pound.
It is true. On the evening of September 14, the meat price was still normal. The next morning, the unit price only went up by $2. However, in the afternoon, customers found that the price had gone up to $12, the more than $15. If meat is still available today, all kinds of meat must be over $15 per pound.
Ruili removed the lockdown on September 23rd and declared victory, but Yunnan province has not announced the end of wartime state yet. These mixed messages from Yunnan have confused many who try to figure out whether it is still safe to travel to Yunnan during the National Day Golden Week, October 1st to October 7th. Yunnan has been the #1 tourist destination in recent years, and China's National Day Golden Week is the busiest week for the tourism industry.